Uh-oh. It's a remix.
That was me trying to turn down the sound, but remixing instead.
DJ Christine.
This is what happens when you produce your own show.
Hey, it's okay. I love it.
Hello, 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 my friend.
Hey, hey.
How you been taking care of yourself this week?
Whew. By being intentional about it, as always. Got some outside time today. And I love it because I told you that even though I work out in a facility that's like outside, it is not the same as being outside. So it was great to be able to walk outside and enjoy the different color leaves today. What about you?
Yeah. Since the last time we talked last week, I put myself in timeout for 40 hours
Hmm.
and I went on a silent self retreat. And it was so good to reset to center and to be outside. I went on a 4.5 mile hike by myself and to a location I hadn't been before. Like, same thing, like
Yeah.
just really being intentional about it, especially in this season. There has been a lot going on, a lot in the world, a lot in the family, just
Hmm.
a lot. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
being intentional. So,
Yeah. I hear what you're saying. And I love it. And it ties right into our category this week. You know, when I first, I'll tell you, usually we don't tell them what it is, but when we talk about environmental wellness, I was like, what else? This is one that I struggled with, right? Like, what else besides trees and um, do we talk about with environments? But then I thought about physical environments. What about work environments? That's usually the first thing that I think about when we talk about occupational wellness. So I'm really excited about what we have to talk about today because I know when my environment looks a certain type of way, it's one of my indicators. Okay, laundry's getting a little messy. What's going on? Maybe something else is going on, and usually it is. So yeah, I'm excited.
all right. Should we do our official intro and get this rocking and
Oh,
rolling?
we haven't even done the intro. Yes, absolutely. Let's get started. Hi, ladies. My name is Shannon Mitchell. I am the founder of Shalo Glow LLC, a handmade shea butter company. I'm your advocate for natural self care and practical business systems.
Hey, y'all. I'm Christine Gautreaux, a white social justice advocate, an international speaker, coach, and published author who helps you upgrade yourself in community care.
Yes, and together we are Women Connected in Wisdom, a podcast grounded in the 8 dimensions of wellness.
And we like to get together every week and have intentional conversations about how do we do this? How do we do this thing called life and be well and be balanced and or at least strive for balance. I don't think
Mhm.
being balanced is actually a thing. And how do we do it in relationships with ourselves and each other? And
Yeah.
we have a phenomenal guest for y'all today that we will be introducing y'all to in just a few moments. But
Hmm.
before we do that, there were a couple other things you and I wanted to chat about.
Yeah, and let's give the definition too, since I already told our listeners what we're talking about.
Let's do it.
Specifically for environmental wellness, we're talking about having a good health by occupying pleasant, stimulating environments that support well being. It also promotes interaction with nature and creating an enjoyable personal environment, both in and out of your workplace.
Right? Well, in this week here in the United States, a lot of people are celebrating Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot that goes in and around that,
Hmm.
right? I've been taking a class recently with the Southern Movement Assembly, one of my activism groups, and we have been talking about decolonizing Thanksgiving, which, if you're on social media, a lot of people will say that, and then people are like, how do we do this, right?
Hmm.
How do we, so I'm going to put up an article, and why do we do it, right? I'm going to put up an article in our show notes today called 9 Ways to Decolonize and Honor Native People on Thanksgiving.
Mm.
um, did you want to chat about that for just a
Of
second?
course. Yeah, let's go into it.
Yeah. Well, the first one you and I've talked about before on the show is learning whose lands we're on and
Mm.
acknowledging that. We come to y'all, we broadcast from the lands of the Muskogee Creek. And I know I broadcast from about a mile east of the Chattahoochee River. So this land, the original stewards of this land were originally Muskogee and Creek, and then the Cherokee did come down into this part of the world also. So that's the number one thing, is just learn. Because what so many people don't realize is, indigenous folks are still here. They are still with us. They may have been moved. They may have been, but they are not gone. Like, there's so many myths about, like, so many people, because if they just learn what our schools teach in the textbooks,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of myths and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of untruths. And so we want to learn the real history. Like, what really happened? What happened to the people that were stewarding your land? Were they forced to give it up? Did they sign a treaty? Did they,
Mm-hmm.
what happened? What was the truth? So we're going to put a link to that in our show notes so you can check it out, because yeah, there's a lot that the U.S. government did not do well with the indigenous people of this land. And now, number three in this article is always, when I read this, don't get startled, listeners,
Mm-hmm.
because I know, coming from a family of people who love food, this one, when I first read it, was like, whoa, what are they asking me to do? It
Mm-hmm.
was decolonize your dinner. So, you know, basically what they're asking me, what they say in this article, is that native chefs have created a culinary movement with the goal of getting indigenous people to honor their ancestors through their dietary choices. So you can bring some Native American dishes to your dinner table. You can honor it. It's like any other culture, or when you're learning about something, and there's links in there about how do you do that, like what is true indigenous food. Like, when I was growing up in East Texas, and I don't want to forget the name of this. Okay, well, I just remember we used to go and we would do field trips, and we would learn about the food and the name of the people that are going to come to me in just a second. But we learned how to make flatbread. We learned how, like, what traditions were. And I've been living in Georgia so long, I lost their name. But number four in this article is listen to indigenous voices. So nowadays, with podcasts, with authors, there's so many ways that we can listen to indigenous voices.
Yeah.
I am going to link in our show notes to the All My Relations podcast that I've been listening to. That is a really cool podcast that I would recommend to our listeners. All right, number five, celebrate Native people. So read the works of the authors. It's things we've talked about with, you know, when we want to honor folks, look at what they're doing. Lift up their voices, lift up their art, lift up, what work they're putting out into the world. Number six was buy native this holiday. I love this
Mm-hmm.
one. Come to cultural survival bazaars and support native artists in your local area. Number seven, share positive representation of Native people. There's so many stereotypes, that share positive representation. Share, you know, we have new representatives across this nation, and
Mm-hmm.
share what's happening there. And number eight, this was, I think, is it not quite the last one, but second to last. End racist Native mascots in sports. This is one that people are like, they get all a little nutty about this. I was going to say
Yeah.
up in arms, but that's such
Mm.
a militaristic term,
I hear
right?
what you're saying. Yeah.
Right? And number nine, the last one in this article, is attend the day of mourning and Alcatraz sunrise gatherings. This is an article that came out of, I believe this one came out of California, but a lot of indigenous folks consider tomorrow a day of mourning. And so you can look up in your area if there is a ceremony or a gathering that is happening. So
That makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
it feels a little heavy, but I think it's important. You and I talk about a lot about intersectionality and lifting up voices that are often underrepresented or not heard. So
Right.
that's why I wanted to bring it today.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to balance it with, a lot of a lot of us will be eating tomorrow, big meals. What's got to be on the table for you, my friends, for
Mm.
tomorrow's dinner?
And honestly, I don't, because of that, because we talk about the decolonization and
Mhm.
the attachment to food. Of course, I probably have what you would consider the staple Thanksgiving meals. You know, macaroni and cheese. We have stuffing, and it's gonna be great. Greens with turkey necks in them, of course. Um, but I don't know if it. I'm always thankful to be eating and just enjoy the holiday, because I've never been completely committed to the idea of it because of its history.
Mhm.
That's usually the most important thing to me. So um, that's what I would say is my must have. To see people that I care about, of course, to eat. Thankfully, I do get to eat every day, and I know that's a blessing. But especially on Thanksgiving, when everybody's spending time with family and stuff, that's usually the part that I focus on. But what about you? What is your go-to Thanksgiving food?
Oh, it depends where I'm at. It's
Mm,
very interesting because,
that makes sense.
if I have this Cajun stuffing that I
Mm.
make that, oh, it just makes my mouth water even to talk about it. Last year I made gumbo,
Mm.
but we're going home for Christmas, and so I'll have gumbo then. So we're probably having some turkey and mashed potatoes, and
Hmm. Yeah.
um, I I'm with you about it being the people, and we'll go on a hike, or
Hmm.
we'll put a puzzle together and play some games. And but yeah, probably the Cajun dressing is the one I'm looking most, or stuffing, or
Yeah.
dressing. It's dressing if it's outside the turkey, stuffing if it's in the turkey.
Okay. So
So
dressing. Got
dressing,
it. I
yeah.
wondered what the difference was. Thank you.
I love it, my friend. Well, let's bring up our guest because I am
Yes.
so excited to talk with her today. Y'all know I say that every week, but
Hmm.
every week I love the people that we're
It's
talking to.
true.
I love our guests. So I want to introduce you. If you're ready, Shannon, are you
Of
ready?
course. Yes.
Okay, let's do it. I want to introduce you to our friend, author and facilitator, Melody LeBaron. She has been called to midwife the dying for more than 30 years. She works with the dying and their caregivers to create an optimal conscious death experience, catalyze the difficult emotions evoked through grief, and claim the gifts of the grieving process. Boy, we need that this holiday season, don't we? Melody also facilitates a leadership process for women and coaches clients through the process of transforming their homes and workspaces, their relationships, and their lives. Woo! She
Hmm.
does it all. Welcome, 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 Melody LeBaron. We are so excited to talk to you today.
Hi.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here with both of you.
Thank you.
Right? We're so grateful. So, talking about grief and loss, like, even as we talk about decolonizing Thanksgiving, like, it gets a little
Right.
heavy really quick.
It does. It does. I I have lived in 30 homes around the United States and Canada. And this 4 years ago, we moved to the mountains of Western North Carolina, which is my first ever move of choice. So I live now on the unceded lands of the Cherokee. And I will be tomorrow with my boys, I will be using the uh, 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 suggestion that was just made by the Indigenous Solidarity Network. They have a Rethinking Thanksgiving toolkit with some great questions, very similar to the ones you were talking about, and just really helping us to come face to face with those myths that we were taught as children,
Mhm.
and really come face to face with those and rethink them and um, in our consciousness, it's more about coming into right relationship with our history and right relationship with the land on which we live and with the people who were here before us.
Mm. I love that, Melody. And I have had the privilege of taking one of your organization classes. And will you speak to what you recommend for folks to coming into right relationship in our homes?
Right. Well, the first thing I think for white people to recognize and for anyone who lives in a Western culture which is a colonized culture, colonizer culture, is to recognize that um, we very often don't have any more awareness of the spirit of the land on which we live than the first white settlers who came to this country and got off their boats and planted their flag on the beach for king and country or queen and country without ever connecting to the spirit of the land. And then they marched into the woods and started chopping down the trees to build forts to keep out. They had called the land uninhabited, but then when they did acknowledge the indigenous peoples, they called them savages. And so, um, we have to rethink. We have to rethink all of that. And we also have to ask ourselves, am I missing something? In my relationship with my home, am I missing something? Because most of us, if we're at choice, if we're blessed enough to be able to be at choice and to choose an apartment or a home that we're going to live in or a trailer, we find something we like and we have connected to it for certain reasons. We like it for certain reasons. And then we move in. We may paint the walls a different color. We may put down new flooring. We lay out our furniture. We hang our artwork and we're done. And from then on, the home itself becomes a thing. But if we were hiking, let's say we were walking along the beach or hiking in the woods, and I were to ask either one of you, do you think that nature is alive? What would you tell me?
Yes, of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And if I were to say, okay, do you believe that nature is intelligent in its own way?
Yes. I've seen it.
Okay. So we may understand that nature is alive and nature is intelligent. But this third question, do you believe that as we are walking through the woods, that nature is aware of us? What do
Yes.
you think?
Hmm.
I would say yes, absolutely.
And see, I would answer those questions all affirmative. When I started teaching, by the way, I started teaching this material to people who wanted to declutter and organize their homes 30 years ago. And most people answered no to those questions. So I feel like there's been a big shift in consciousness or awareness. So so all three of us agree that all three of those things are true. Nature is alive, nature is intelligent, nature is aware of us. But somehow, for most Western people, when we enclose nature and create a home or a workspace, somehow the space inside becomes dead to us. And it doesn't have to be that way. All we have to do is think deeply about it, think critically about it, recognize that all of the elements that make up our physical bodies are also present in the bodies of our home. And that everything that's created, whether it's, created by nature or God or created by man, everything created wants to fulfill the measure of its creation. So, if we can understand that inside those elements that make up our bodies and that make up the bodies of our homes, spirit is singing through each, or intelligence, we can call it intelligence, is singing through each one of those elements. So, intelligence is singing through our bodies and through the bodies of our home. And we've got that ineffable something that we might call the spirit of nature, that just because we have enclosed the space doesn't mean it's not here and alive and present and aware of us. And I will take this a step further. I believe that the intelligence dwelling inside our homes, inside our workspaces, wants to partner with us, wants to be treated like a full equal partner. So the very first thing I do, whether I'm doing a space clearing, either live in someone's home or remotely via Zoom, the very first thing we do is I help them connect deeply to the land on which they live until they can actually feel the spirit of that land. And then I have them connect deeply to the spirit in their home, the spirit of their home, until they can feel that, until they can begin to communicate with and feel an ability to have a conscious partnership with their home. Now, yes, I'm there very often because the client wants to get decluttered and organized. But I will say that it's very difficult to get organized and to stay organized if you are not attending to the relationship that we have, the relationships we all have with our homes and with our land. And, most of the time, by the time people are in their 30s, at least by their 40s, most people have cleaned up their relationships. Maybe they had some trouble in their family of origin. So maybe they had some dysfunction going on and some codependency, but most people by their middle adulthood, they have cleaned up their relationships. But very often I find that clients have a relationship with their home in which there's at least one room that every time they go in it, their energy level drops, their mood drops. It's almost like being with that person from childhood who made them feel so bad, right? And so we have these relationships with our homes, with our land, and with everything in our spaces. Like every piece of furniture, every piece of art, every piece of paper is either raising your mood and energy level or lowering it. And so, we start with the relationship. And in order for you to have a right relationship with your home, that really starts with acknowledging the spirit of the land, the spirit of the home, and treating it as if it wants to partner with you to help you achieve your goals. I believe our homes want to do more than just be shelter and keep us safe and keep us warm. I believe our homes want to really partner with us.
I love that. I love what that brings up, Melody, when I imagine that. And I love, I've said for years it all comes down to relationships. Before
Yes.
I met you, I never really thought about it. Oh, even where we live comes down to the relationship. But I mean, it makes so much sense. I mean, I have a whole story I won't get into on this episode about how I ended up where I'm at because it's a pretty magical story about the land and what I'm supposed to be doing here. But I find it fascinating. What about you, Shannon?
So I hadn't thought about speaking or sitting with the energy where I live, right? I might think about cleansing the energy when I move. Like you said, you've lived in 30 different places. That's a lot of energy from other people's families. That's usually what I think about. But after I clean it off, then I usually don't think about it after that. So I've been watching this Netflix show that talks about some of the similar things, and so I've been more intentional about it. And it's interesting to think about because it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Melody, this season is often difficult for folks for
Yeah.
various different reasons. We're going on 2 years of a pandemic. We are in the season of heading towards darkness. So a lot of people struggle around the holidays, whether it's missing people, whether it's grief and loss, with death or with estrangement in their families. Like, how do you tie in environmental wellness and creating spaces? How do you tie that in with the grief? I know it's a lot. I may not be asking the question right, but
No, no,
how do we get
it's
our environments to support us and help us be well?
right. So you both know, and I'm sure our listeners know, the feeling of preparing our space for our favorite person or people, right? And and we clean and we decorate and we just make it really look beautiful. We're creating a sanctuary of sorts. We're creating space. Every time you have a dinner party, you're creating the space for some magical conversations to happen. So um, so we have memories. We have memories of what the holidays are, whichever December holidays we celebrate. We have these memories of, and we have these hopes and desires of what this one will be. But we've also got, like you said, with many of us, including myself, will have missing places at the table. So there's two approaches. I feel like there's two approaches. And one approach is like, well, we're just going to sweep that under the rug. We're just going to pretend that didn't happen. We're going to pretend that that really uncomfortable interaction with Uncle Bob didn't happen, and we're just going to play nice. Mm-mm. I don't recommend that, because then we are leaving our authenticity at the door. I recommend we not only create a sacred, beautiful environment, declutter, organize, just decorate and make it beautiful to us, but also, and I love your Shannon. I love the things you talked about with clearing the space. So I would add. Most people just think of smudging, but I would add, if there's any emotional uh, residue from, maybe anger got discharged in the dining room last time it was used, or maybe there was some sadness there. Take a little spritz bottle. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. I have one that I use just in my office. So get a little spritz bottle, fill it with water, maybe put some homeopathic remedies, rescue remedy is a good one, and some essential oils, and use the water element to cleanse the space. The gift of the water element is cleansing. And another way that you can really purify a space is to light a candle and with intention ask the fire element, which is all about purification, to help you purify the energy there. And then smudge would be the air element, which is all about transformation. And I would also bring in the earth element, bring in some plants, or bring in some items from nature. Very often we do at the holidays anyway, and bring those items in with the intention to ground the space so that people feel grounded and centered in their bodies. They're present in their bodies rather than just in their heads. And and so and so if you've had a loss in the last few years, that loss is still going to be present for you. So bring it into the space. I have a grief altar. And so, when I celebrate Christmas with my children, there will be a photograph of my son Logan, who isn't with us. And so, bring in photographs, create an altar. Some people actually set a place at the table for their missing loved one, which I think is just beautiful, because it gives us, those of us who have been left behind after a loss, it gives us a way to acknowledge the person that we love. It also gives us a way to acknowledge the empty place at the table and our own grief about that. Every Christmas, I write a letter. I write a Christmas card to my son Logan. This will be my 24th year of writing a Christmas card to him after he died. And I can look back on those cards that I've written each Christmas and see how much it has helped me to process my sadness that he wasn't with us for that holiday. So, so I would just, really encourage our listeners to make a place at the table for your own grief and your own loss. Make a place at the table for any emotions that are uncomfortable. Um, and if you're going to be getting together with um, with family members that you disagree with politically, rather than creating any more divides, sign up for I'm going to show you, I just printed out last night. I'm registered to take um, the Braver Angels course um, at the end of this month. And it's all about how to talk with people who have opposite political paradigms and values than I have. And I am such a humanitarian that I can very easily come into conflict with people who don't hold those values. So I'm really up leveling, maturing my capacity to be present with all my values and ideals, and for staying in right relationship with the people I love and care about.
Oh, I love that, Melody. And we will put that into our show notes so folks can check out the Braver Angels workshop. And I love like all the tools you've given people to think about, like ways that you can honor people that you've lost or are missing. I love that a lot. Like,
Yeah.
and I also love that when you think about, we all grow up in different ways. And some people are used to decorating, some people are not. And your perspective on that, just, I really love that. Like bringing in the elements, bringing in intentionality around it, and creating basically what you're saying is creating sacred space.
Right. And here's the other thing I want to say to all the people who live alone. Very often it kind of feels like, well, why would I bother? Why would I bother decorating? It's just me. Why would I bother? And I would encourage you to see what it is that you can do that makes your space feel beautiful and alive, so that you can actually feel the life force. Like when we walk through the woods, we feel the life force out in nature, on the land. Well, I want to feel that in my home, even if it's just me. I am worth having sacred space.
Mm. And I hear you, and I hear, now you're not saying to folks, you have to go all out. Like,
No,
when you talk about creating an altar or you create a sacred space, like what is something small that people could do if they're in a small space or if it feels overwhelming to them? What is something, give us an idea.
yeah. So an altar is just an item or a group of items that alters our mood, that uplifts our mood and energy level. And so my husband and I were hiking in the mountains last week, and I found some beautifully colored, brightly colored leaves, and I brought them in and put them with some pine cones and a few gourds and made an altar.
I love that
That's
because you don't. It doesn't have to cost any money. It doesn't have to, like. There are so many gifts of nature, just like what you were
yes,
talking about. And for our listeners who are not hearing Shannon's voice, she's having a little bit of a tech issue. So I don't want you to think I'm just doing all the talking. If you're just listening to us and not watching us today, she will join us as soon as she can. But yeah, those gifts of nature, the gifts of that don't have to cost money, like that
right,
literally fall from the trees.
right. The other thing I will say is anything brought inside from nature, or plants that you have, or flowers, have a lot of life force around them. There's a whole lot more life force in that energy field around a plant than there is in a silk flower. Okay. And the same is true of our artwork. If we have an original piece of art which both of these pieces behind me are original pieces of art. If we have original pieces of art, they have more life force to them than a reproduction. And when I douse in clients' homes, there's so much life force in those drawings that were the children make, right?
Oh,
That usually get put on a bulletin board or on the refrigerator door. There's so much life force. So when my nieces and nephews make me their drawings and their gifts, like they get displayed because that's a lot of life force there.
right. One of my favorite magnets that is still on my fridge today, and it is a reproduction because it was one of those places when my daughter, who is now in her 20s, was probably 4 or 5, that they took her footprints and then she did a poem, and then they put it together on a magnet that shrunk it down. And when you said that about life force, that's immediately where my brain went, because it was her little 4-year-old voice about happy flowers or walking. It was her experience in nature at 4 is actually what it was. And it's her art in her, and that spirit of, a 4-year-old is just,
Right.
I love that. I love that idea.
Yeah,
So,
and that's one of the things that is so precious to me. Our Christmas tree decorations are pictures of our children. Most of them are pictures of our children at all the different ages.
oh, I love that. Boy, that just brings a lot of life force into the room,
Exactly.
doesn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. Now, when I took your class, I don't know if you would be willing to share this or not, or people need to take your class to get this. Would you be willing to tell our listeners about how to heal, like the original wound?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. This is so vital. I just want to share this with as many people as possible. So I'm a holistic professional organizer, and I'm also a feng shui consultant. And each different area of the home, from the perspective of feng shui, is like a different member of the board of directors of your life. And the very center of the home, the very center, is the board of director member that is responsible for health and unity. And that's health of body, mind, and spirit, and health of the home and land. And that's unity of the body, mind, and spirit, and unity of the home and the land, and as well as for you and everyone in the household. So when I was trying to figure out years ago, I knew because of my own racial equity work that I wanted to create an altar that honored not just the indigenous people. Right now, I live on unceded Cherokee land, but to honor all of the ways that colonizer culture has um, harmed. I wanted to acknowledge that to myself and to honor the efforts that I and so many millions of others are making toward reparations, toward healing. And I realized the center of the home is the right area of the bagua, the feng shui bagua. So we have a bookshelf in the center of our home. And on that bookshelf, I placed my most precious books um, about this work, this work of healing, this work of truth telling, this work of reparations. And so these books are stacked up. And then, I've got a beautiful, beautiful, I wish I'd thought to bring it in, a beautiful beaded gourd that has the Cherokee syllabary. And beaded around the syllabary is Grandmother Spider.
You
And
actually sent me a picture of this. Let me see if I can pull it up here and show our
there,
listeners what you're talking about. So, if you're listening, if you're watching us, in addition to listening, there is a beautiful picture that you can find on Facebook or YouTube. And if you're listening, Melody just described it.
and that's a gourd, and this Cherokee artist hollowed out the gourd, and each one of those are tiny little beads. She put beeswax inside the gourd, and one at a time with the tiniest little tweezers, she placed those beads.
Mm.
So it's something I absolutely just love. And that is there with some books about the Cherokee people. Yep. And some books that remind me every day. This is an area of my home I pass every day. And that reminds me of my work to heal what I call the original wound. Because the original wound, when the land was torn from its native peoples, that did not just wound the Cherokee, the Creek, the Muskogee, all the tribes. That wounded the land. And when I do a space clearing and I follow the timeline down, that's always the original wound.
Mm. Right.
Yeah.
Well, after taking your class, I reached out to an artist, a Muskogee Creek artist, and got a piece of art to go in the center of my home. So I just want to tell you thank you, like
Oh,
for that wisdom, for that. Um, it's a small thing, but it's an incremental step towards reparations. And
right.
had an incredible conversation with this artist, and he was thrilled about the intention of the artwork and what was happening. And I am going to put a link to his art for our listeners in our show notes because his name is, I want to make sure I say his name right, Kirk Morrison. And he is a Muskogee Creek artist, and he is actually in Austin, Texas now, which is fun because I'm originally from Texas. So it was this
Right.
very cool interaction and connection. And he was like, "I'm so glad a piece of my art is going back to the motherland." That's what
Yeah.
he called it. And so I got a beautiful print of his that was a buffalo, and it was a mixed media print. And yeah,
Oh,
it was really yummy. And it was also interesting because when I was searching and looking, he came up under a struggling artist during the pandemic. So it was all like
oh,
an emerging struggling artist, and how do we do this because the arts were hit so hard during the
yes.
pandemic,
Yes.
even though it's what everybody leaned on during the pandemic. Everybody was watching Netflix, they were listening to
Right.
music, they were doing the things to survive, and the artists were struggling. And
Right.
so it felt good on multiple levels to be able to purchase that piece of art and bring it into my home. So I
Yeah.
just wanted to say thank you for that wisdom. And yeah, it I'm grateful. I'm
Yeah.
grateful for the work that you do in this world, my friend.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's such a joy to help someone transform their relationship with their home and their land, and then get it completely decluttered and organized. Because I think it was James Clear who said, we don't rise to the level of our aspirational goals to declutter and organize our space. We fall to the level of our systems. And
Woo,
so,
ouch.
so this next January, so I'm going to repeat that course that I taught last January.
Okay.
This time, I'm really going to focus on systems, on creating systems.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I may be in it again, my friend. I loved your class so much. So, all our listeners, we'll put a link to Melody's website so you can check out all the different work she has. But I will give a testimony to that organizational class and say, take it. And I probably need to take it again. So, yes, to system build. I'm a system gal, but I also am neurodivergent and
Right.
live in a house of ADD and artists. So, woo, yeah, we can need all. I just may need to move you in, Melody. I know you moved out of Georgia to North Carolina, but we may need to move you back.
I do. I do occasionally still work in person with clients. I would love to work with you in your house. I
So,
mean, to me, that it's such a joy to help create what I consider flow. When everything is when you've so I'll just step back and say that very often when I begin working with a client, 80% of the items in their home 80% of the total items drag their attention back into the past. And
ah,
when we're finished, 80% of the items in the home celebrate and draw my client's attention into their ideal future.
will you say that one more time? That whole sequence of what you just said. And welcome back, Shannon. We're glad you made
Yes, welcome back.
Highlight.
So, so yes, when I start working with clients, usually most of them, you've heard of the 80-20 rule. And so it's like when working in a sales organization, 20% of the salespeople make 80% of the sales. Well, the same 80-20 rule applies in our homes. Usually we wear 20% of our clothes in our closet 80% of the time. And so when I start working with clients, what they tell me is that 80% of the items, and I'm talking artwork, I'm talking books, I'm talking about pieces of paper, pieces of furniture, clothing, 80% of the items in their space drag their attention back into the past or drag their attention because these things are left undone or there are projects that need to be attended to. So it's all a sort of a dragging or a drain on the energy level. The energy level is going down. When we are complete, even if no, I'm not one of those people who says get rid of all the photos, get rid of everything that happened in the past. No, I'm not like that. And 80% of the items in the home when we are finished draw my client's attention into their ideal future. Everything has a purpose, has a place, has a meaning for my clients. And it literally, their whole environment is working, conspiring together to help them live their ideal lives and function as their best selves.
talk about environmental wellness. Whoa. Like
Yeah.
if your whole environment was conspiring for your ideal self.
Yeah. I mean, can you just imagine like if every space, every drawer, every cupboard, every closet was organized for efficiency, and then everything was created around beauty, your ideal of beauty, and what your body needs, what your mind and heart need. So, yes, have 20% of the items in your home to memorialize and celebrate your past, but let everything, most everything that you're looking at and interacting with on a daily basis, draw your attention into an ideal future that allows you to feel like you are expanded and able to be of greater and greater service to others.
Mm. Melody, thank you so much for this conversation. Shannon, do you have any questions or comments you want to ask?
No, again, thank you for the wisdom. That's why I love being part of this podcast. I hate that I missed it. Of course, thankfully we have replays and I know where to find the podcast, right? But I love even the last part when I think about emotional and mental wellness. Especially with my degree in psychology, that's a lot of what I thought about mental illness and just your mental disposition and your position as a whole, right? That's what I think about, where people operate from. So
Right.
having what you look at and the things in your environment help push you towards your ideal self. It makes so much sense that it's one of those things like, why hadn't I thought about that already? So I'm glad that I was able to hop back in and catch that part of it.
Right.
Well, it was fantastic to have this conversation. I love what the two of you are about. I love
Thank
the
you.
episodes I've listened to. So thank you so much for just inviting me.
We're so
Absolutely.
glad to have you. Before we pop you back into the green room, Melody, every week, you want to set this up, Shannon?
Yeah, so every week we like to have action items, right? We talk about a lot of stuff, but we want to make sure that we're putting the things that we know into action, and that's what makes us wise. So, for environmental wellness specifically, because that's our topic this week, what is your wisdom in action and one thing that you're going to focus on and make sure that we prioritize that?
Well, I guess there would be two things. One would be to create order,
Mm-hmm.
and the next thing would be to create beauty, something that's beautiful for you. And then if I could do a third, it would be to find a way to honor your grief during this holiday season,
Mm-hmm.
so that when you're actually celebrating the holidays, you've already processed the grief and you're more present for whoever is in front of you.
I love that. And
That
that's
is
what I'm going to work on.
beautiful.
Yeah, how do you or what does it look like for me to honor that space and still be grateful and enjoy the holiday and the festivities and the family time?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
My wisdom in action this week, y'all, is I'm going to be intentional about the beauty. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I was raised where we didn't look at that all the time. Like, we were raised on a farm. So it was about the food, or it was about
Mm-hmm.
the chores, or about, and so I always do a little bit, but I think after this conversation, I'm really going to put some intention towards it, and I'm also gonna not get stuck in the martyr, because sometimes I get a little stuck in the martyr, honestly, about how much I'm cooking and cleaning. So I'm just being real. So I think I'm gonna focus on the beauty and the setting of the table, and of the the making it all beautiful, and balancing that with what are chores and can
And
be a
the
beautiful time.
aesthetic beauty of the food.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. All of that. Thank you so much, Melly, for this conversation. We look forward to more. We will link all of your stuff in our show notes for folks, so they can find you and check out the awesomeness that you're doing in the world. And hopefully, you'll come back and talk to us next year sometime.
Absolutely. Yes.
We
Yes.
appreciate you, my friend.
Thank you. Environmental wellness.
Right?
Yeah.
That 80/20. I love the way that she said that. I love
Yeah.
the whole transitioning your space from
Mm-hmm.
the past into pulling you, like pulled by the vision of where you're going and what you.
Yeah.
I got some work to do, my friend.
Yeah, and don't we all? And it's so interesting because when you say that, it reminds me of our original conversations and when we were talking about what to name the podcast, and we were like, we don't want it to seem like too much work, but we have a lot of work to do to be well in this country. Like we said, we're coming from colonization, so that
Hmm.
comes with a certain mindset. It comes with a lot of things that, in order to try to find the healthiest teeter totter of the balance, right? There's going to be some unpacking and some reorganizing. So when she said that, it's funny because it reminds me of t-shirts too. And I have old t-shirts from old jobs, and it's just like, well, but I need the t-shirts to sleep in and to do this. But do you really need that one? No, you can get new t-shirts that are about what your life is now and makes you think about where you're going instead of mementos of the past that you feel like you have to hold on to. So I like that too.
Right? So much
Hmm.
juicy content to think about.
Yeah.
So, talking about a little bit of work to do, what is
Yes.
happening over at Shalo Glow? Like,
Oh my
what's going
goodness.
on over there for this holiday season?
So much stuff. So we do have, of course, Black Friday sales coming up. But what I'm most excited about is to completely transition to our new containers. So if you ladies, you gentlemen like glass containers, please go to shayloglow.com because they are almost out, and the kits are already sold out, and the oils are sold out. So we have the sugar scrub and the shea butter available for you. And then of course we have the new home glow kits and the travel glow kits, and those are the new sizes that everybody was asking about. But I'm so excited. I'm excited for the new scents, and for it to help people. That's what I think about when I think about my space. Like she said, space for the grief. I have a whole little area that I go to before I go to work, and it has my oil, my Shalo Glow oil. And I love that because that's what I was always forgetting. I would do the deodorant, do everything else, to get in the car, start driving, and look at my hands and say, oh no, how can I walk out the house without Shalo Glow? So I love that it's being spread to all the houses over the holidays, and that everybody's being more intentional about including their self care as we take care of all this other stuff. And yes, as you see, if you're with us, if you're viewing our podcast, you will see that discount code for Women Connected in Wisdom. That is WISE5. And you do get 5% off of your Shayla Glow order.
Right. Thank you so much for doing that for our listeners. I
Of
really
course.
appreciate that.
Of
And
course.
I know our listeners appreciate it if they are one of your customers because it is some
Yeah.
awesome stuff.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, y'all, it has. We're hoping you're taking care of yourself. We are hoping that you are taking care in order to sustain your community care because there is a
Yeah.
lot out there. And you can always reach out to me on my website if you need to chat and have some extra support. And because I do have a few slots available for private coaches. But until next time,
Yes. Be well, be wise, and be whole. We will see you back here next week, live at 5.